Welcome to Buddha's in Your Landfill. It's a beautiful day here in Blackstone, the center of the world, but then you too are the center of your world. So today, the Morning Joe, which I watch in the morning, was full of the remembrances of John McCain and 1968 Democratic Convention, which was 50 years ago. So I hadn't realized this. 1968 was 50 years ago, and John McCain and I are the same age. So while he was in prison in Hanoi Hilton, I was teaching in Northern Virginia, high school English, and the whole nation cracked open in 1968, and so did I. So I wanted to. I don't share my experiences very often, but when I do, they seem to be appropriate. So let me share 1968, and the title I put up here is 1968 and the Crack in My Egg, or I should say, Cosmic Egg. That was a book written by Chilton Pierce, who was a writer and devotee of Swami Muktananda, and he wrote a book called The Crack in the Cosmic Egg. And so anyway, 1968, here I am, 1968, and it was in May of that year. I think Martin Luther King had just been assassinated. And I went to sleep listening to, somebody gave me a tape of Krishnamurti, audio tape. So I went to sleep listening to it. And when I woke up, the ego that I had gone to sleep with didn't wake up. And I was in a new dimension of just being totally present. Looked in the mirror, and I just broke out laughing because I recognized myself. I said, there you are. I've been looking for you all of my life. There you are. And I was suddenly in a state of total freedom, feeling like Adam, who had just been created in this brave new world of unexplored being. And I was king of the world. I had a little motorcycle, and I was just like Evel Knievel. And everything was new, and I saw a horse, and I saw the cosmic horse. And I started reading Walt Whitman, and I was reading Song of Myself as if I was writing it. And I remember reading the words of Jesus as if I was speaking them. In other words, there was a sense of being the center of the world in a timeless zone where all things past and future were present. And so this really began, I was really, you could say, born again at that time. So I knew I had a destiny. I was on a quest because I had to find out the source of this awakening. I had to find out who the Father was, who the source was. I had to find the guru. But anyway, just as with the nation, I was changed in 1968. And so in remembrance of John McCain, and then realizing that this is 50-year anniversary, our nation is still trying to sort itself out after the crack in the cosmic egg of 1968. For myself, I left teaching. I could no longer teach in an institution, and we went to Florida, ended up on a houseboat in North Miami Beach, on a little river, in a little yacht basin called Rama Yacht Basin. And it was a year later that I found my first guru, Swami Rama. Ironic, isn't it? And I wrote a little book of poems called The Birth of a Soul. And I remember sitting on my little houseboat in this little river, and writing poetry, and wondering, what am I going to do with myself? So I decided, well, what can I do with this new awakening, this new spiritual energy, this new revelation? Well, I'd become a minister. So the following year, I found myself waiting to be accepted at the Union Theological Seminary. And while I was waiting for my application to come through, I found myself teaching in Vermont in a private school called Cutler Academy. And I remember my students that late summer cutting classes and going to Woodstock. So then I finally went down to the seminary with the hopes of making my path into ministry. And the seminary I went there in the middle of the year, and the seminary reviewed my application and then rejected it. Best thing that ever happened. So I knew that my path was not going to be in the Christian ministry. And so yada, 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 here I am now. Anyway, I just wanted to, I've been reflecting on the path of our nation and my own path after the cataclysm of 1968, which, as you recall, included the Tet invasion, the Kennedy assassination, the Martin Luther King assassination, the riots, the Democratic Convention, which was in Chicago, and the whole total collapse of normality and even reality. And so I've always reflected, that in my own crack, in my own personal cosmic egg, coincided with the crack in the national cosmic egg. And it's often that we look in history when times are in great confusion and uncertainty and conflict and violence. These are also times of great creativity, great openings. There are many spiritual experiences happening in the 60s, late in 68. So as the monolithic structure of society breaks up, it also breaks up in individuals. And of course there's violence, but there's also great creativity. Think of all the music that was created in the late 60s. The psychedelics, the mystical, the drugs, the mysticism, and all of the people today who are on spiritual paths because of the stirring and the cracks in the cosmic egg of the late 60s. So we're still living today. We're trying to sort out the pieces of that egg that cracked then. Because the egg that cracked was basically the monolithic egg of the 50s. And the mythology of the 50s. And the mythology broke open in the 60s. And not only personally, but socially. And that creates great disturbances, great creativity, and it also creates what we call mysticism, which is the transcendence of the social customs and objective experience of the world, and opens up the internal, just like when you crack open an egg and you open up and there's the yolk, or maybe there's a chick, whatever. Anyway, so I wrote here, what is this journey that we're all on? Because we're all on the same journey. We're all pilgrims. And basically, the pilgrimage is making the unconscious conscious. That's what it's all about. That's the maturing of the individual. We're all maturing individuals. We're all on the path of maturation. And what is that in human terms? It's not just becoming a mature body, a mature physical, or mature in social references, like a mature, you've got your own business or your career or your family or whatever. you feel you fulfilled socially according to the norms of society. That's one level of maturation, where you become the father, and when you become the mother, and you have a family, or you have a job, or whatever that role of the father and the mother is to you when you're a child. That's on one level. But the next level of maturation is consciousness, making the unconscious conscious, you see. And that requires an awakening of the heart. That requires hearing the call to adventure. You know, there's several levels or calls to adventure. The first one we hear as a child is the call to be an adult and to take on adult responsibilities. But then there's another call that not everybody hears. But that call is to make the unconscious conscious, so you're constantly cracking open your egg. You're constantly breaking up the algae. You're constantly breaking up the solidification of your life. You're constantly breaking up the reformation of the egg. Because the egg, you see, constantly reforms itself. And we're constantly finding ourselves inside again, feeling the containment, you know. And so we start pecking, and we crack a little, oh, there's light out there. And once that little hole starts, once that insight happens, once that realization happens, I'll peck a light, we just start pecking at it, and suddenly the egg falls off, and here we are born again. So life is a constant path of dying and being born again, of being enclosed in the egg, realizing its containment, picking a hole in it, getting a little beam of light, and then breaking out again. Being closed, breaking out, being closed, breaking out, an ever-expanding consciousness, breaking out of the egg of unconsciousness. So there is no end to that. There is no place for the Son of Man to put his head. There is no resting place, because whenever we rest, we're back in the egg. We're enclosed again. And we feel secure for a while, but something's not right. And we start pecking. And that little beam of light comes through, and we remember the light. We remember the consciousness, and we just cannot help but peck and break out again and again and again. So, thanks for dropping in.